जय गिरिवरधारी जय गोपी जनवल्लभ जय गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन ब्रज जनरंजन यशोदानंदन ब्रज जनरंजन यमुना तीरावनचारी यमुना तीरावनचारी हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे Hare Krishna everyone. Shama Mataji, can everybody hear me online?
Yes, Mataji, we can.
Okay, because we are not using the mic, so okay. So we will start with Srila Prabhupada's Leela Mrita. So yesterday we stopped on page 454. We'll start with Kate listened to the whole story, how Swamiji had told them to fast, and how he had read from his manuscript, and how he had said he would explain initiation, and how everybody had learned forward all years, and Swamiji had dropped a bomb. The students accepts the spiritual master and agrees to worship him as God. Any questions? Swamiji had asked softly, and then he had called out, I don't know if I want to be initiated now. Well, he confessed, we have to worship him as God. Well, you are already doing that by accepting whatever he tells you, Keith replied, and he advised that they talk it over with Swamiji before the initiation. So he went back to the temple and consulted Howard, and together they went up to Swamiji's apartment. Does what you told up this morning? Howard asked. Mean we are supposed to accept the spiritual master to be God? That means he is due the same respect as God, being God's representative, Prabhupada replied calmly. Then he is not God. No, Prabhupada said. God is God. The spiritual master is his representative. Therefore, he is as good as God because he can deliver God to the sincere disciple. Is that clear? It was. It was a mental and physical strain to go all day without eating. Jan was restless. She complained that she couldn't possibly stay any longer, but had to go take care of her cat. Prabhupada tried to overrule her, but she left anyway. Most of the prospective initiates spent several hours that day stringing their shiny red wooden beads. Having tied one end of the string to a window bar or a radiator, they would slide one bead at a time up the string and knot it tightly, chanting one mantra of Hare Krishna for each bead. It was devotional service, chanting and stringing your beads for initiation. Every time they knotted another bead, it seemed like a momentous event. Prabhupada said that devotees in India chanted at least 64 rounds of beads a day. Saying the Hare Krishna mantra once on each of the 108 beads constituted one round. His spiritual master had said that anyone who didn't chant 64 rounds a day was fallen. At first, some of the boys thought that they would also have to chant 64 rounds, and they became perplexed. That would take all day. How could you do a job if you had to chant 64 rounds? How could anybody chant 64 rounds? Then someone said Swamiji had told him that 32 rounds a day would be sufficient minimum for the West. Well, he said he had heard Swamiji say 25, but even that seems impossible. Then Prabhupada offered the rock bottom minimum 16 rounds a day. Without fail, whoever got initiated would have to promise. The beats, stringing, chanting, reading, and dozing went on until 11 at night, when everyone was invited up to Swamiji's room. As they filed through the courtyard, they sensed an unusual calm in the atmosphere. And Houston Street, just over the wall, was quiet. There was no moon. As his followers sat on the floor, contentedly eating prasadam from paper plates, Swamiji sat among them, telling stories about the birth of Lord Krishna. Krishna had appeared on this evening 5,000 years ago. He was born, the son of Vasudeva and Devaki, in the prison of King Kamsa at night, and his father Vasudeva immediately took him to Vrindavan, where he was raised as the son of Nand Maharaj, a cowherd man. Prabhupada also spoke of the necessity of purification of spiritual advancement. It is not enough merely to chant holy words, he said. One must be pure inside and out. Chanting impurity brings spiritual advancement. The living entity becomes impure because he wants to enjoy material pleasure. But the impure can become pure by following Krishna, by doing all works for Krishna. Beginners in Krishna consciousness have a tendency to relax their efforts in a short time. But to advance spiritually, you must resist this temptation and continuously increase your efforts and devotion. I will stop there. Then we'll move to Bhagavatam. So today's verse is from Canto 4, chapter 26, verse number 20. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiyat Nashtaprayasya Bhadresu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Neshtiki. So we'll try to recite the verse. Anunanyetha Shanake Viro Nunya Kovida Pasparsha Padayugalam Ahachotsangalalitam Anunanyetha Shanake Viro Nunya Kovida Pasparsha Padayugalam Ahachotsangalalitam Anunanyetha Shanake Viro Nunya Kovida Pasparsha Padayugalam Ahachotsangalalitam. Anybody would like to recite the verse? Viro nunya kovida Pasparsha padayugalam Ahachoksam Anunyeta shanake Viro nunya kovida Pasparsha padayugalam Ahachoksam. So, word to word translation. Anunya began to flatter. Atha, thus, Shanake, gradually, Veera, the hero, Anunya Kovida, one who is very expert in flattery, Pasparsha, touched, Padayugalam, both the feet, Aha, he said, Cha, also, Utsanga, on his lap, Lalitam, thus being embraced. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Because the king was very expert in flattery, he began to pacify his queen very slowly. First, he touched her 2 feet, then embraced her nicely, seating her on his lap, and began to speak as follows. Purport. One has to awaken his Krishna consciousness by first regretting his past deeds. Just as King Puranjana began to flatter his queen, one should, by deliberate consideration, raise himself to the platform of Krishna consciousness. To attain such an end, one must touch the lotus feet of the spiritual master. Krishna consciousness cannot be achieved by self-endeavor. One must therefore approach a self-realized Krishna conscious person and touch his lotus feet. Prahlad Maharaj therefore said, Naisham matis tavad urukraman griham sparshate anartha pagamu yat artha mahiyasham padarajo bhishekam nishkinchananam na vrinita yavat. From Srimad Bhagavatam 7.5.32. One cannot come to the prescience of Krishna consciousness unless he touches the dust of the lotus feet of a person who has become a Mahatma, a great devotee. This is the beginning of the surrendering process. Lord Krishna wants everyone to surrender onto him, and this surrendering process begins when one touches the lotus feet of a bona fide spiritual master. By sincerely rendering service to a bona fide spiritual master, one begins his spiritual life in Krishna consciousness. Touching the lotus feet of a spiritual master means giving up one's false prestige and unnecessarily puffed up position in the material world. Those who remain in the darkness of material existence due to their falsely prestigious position, so-called scientists and philosophers, are actually atheists. They do not know the ultimate cause of everything. Although bewildered, they are not ready to surrender themselves to the lotus feet of a person who knows things in their proper perspective. In other words, one cannot arouse Krishna consciousness simply by his own mental speculation. One must surrender to a bona fide spiritual master. Only this process will help. Wonderful purport by Srila Prabhupada. Before we go ahead, we'll do the invocation prayer. ॐ अज्ञानतिमन्दस्य ज्ञानञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूप कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरु श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगण रघुनाथान्वितां तां सजीवं साद्वैतं स्वावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगणललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्णा करुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिकान्त राधाकान्त नमोऽस्तु ते तप्तकाञ्चन गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामीति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे जय श्रीकृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानन्द श्री अद्वैता गदाधर शिवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे Hare Krishna everyone. Today's verse and what we read from Srila Prabhupada's Lilamrit aligned quite a lot. Magically, it's aligned. When I was reading the Prabhupada's Lilamrit, I was like, oh wow, this is what I'm going to speak about today. So, where we are in the translation, we have seen how Narad Muni is explaining about King Puranjana. And in this verse, you have known that he is flattering his wife and trying to pacify his wife. So there is an analogy. Puranjana is represented as a soul and a queen as the intelligence. So he left his proper intelligence when he was going to hunt in the forest. And leaving his wife represents that he gave up the religious principle for sense gratification. So he went on to do sinful activities, of course, without his proper intelligence. So there are 3 points that are mentioned in the purport. What are the 3 points that are mentioned? Maybe I'll just explain that. So first point through the translation. First point, what Prabhupada has broken into 3 points. The first one is he was being expert in flattery, slowly appeased her. So which means that he is, first thing is, of course, we need to be regretful about our sinful activities. And then one needs to, he said as a promise that I will no longer use my intelligence for enjoying sinfully. That's what it means when he's trying to slowly appease her. And Prabhupada says in purport that just as King Puranjana began to flatter his queen, one should try to deliberate consideration raise himself to the platform of Krishna consciousness. And then he first touched her 2 lotus feet. So that 2 lotus feet also represent few things. So first is that giving up the ahankara, giving up the pride, and then respecting the devotees. So without giving up the pride, one cannot approach the spiritual master. So this is what Prabhupada explains in the purport in relation to this translation, that to attain such an end, one must touch the lotus feet of the spiritual master. Krishna consciousness cannot be achieved by self-endeavor. So one must therefore approach a self-realized Krishna conscious person and touch his lotus feet. And thus he embraced her on his lap and spoke, which represent that he takes the intelligence back in his heart. So that's what we understand as the context of where we are. So what we understand is that first we need to regret our past needs, which Prabhupada has been explaining, that one has to awaken his consciousness by first regretting his past deeds. And he also mentions the second thing, which we have already discussed. Anybody would like to mention? So, two things he mentions, two steps to progress in spiritual life. One is, first thing is to regret. What do we do after being regretful about our past sinful activities? Introspect. And after that? Spiritual master, you must approach the spiritual master, touch his lotus feet as the second part. That's how the purport is divided into. So we must think of removing the sinful tendency, of course, and that's what introspection is, which Mataji has very well mentioned. So there is a sin cycle that because of that cycle is just like how we have a cycle of birth and death, we are also in a sinful cycle that causes someone to cause sinful activities. And why that happens? The root cause is avidya, that is ignorance. So when somebody is in ignorance, they will have the desire to do sinful activities. And when they have the desire to do sinful activities, they will, of course, do the sinful activities. And that will give manifested results and unmanifested results. And manifested results, which is prarabdha, will give to klesha, which is suffering. And unmanifested aprarabdha will go to as a kutam, which is the tendency. That is sinful tendency, and that will feed into the desire. So it becomes and develops as a habit. So that's why it's very important to repent and then also think of, through the knowledge, think of how we can remove the sinful activities from the root, which starts from the ignorance. So there are a few examples from Shastras. The example of Ajamila. He did lots of sinful activities out of ignorance because he got into ignorance. He had some knowledge, but then and because of his some past pious deeds, he had some intelligence that he could name his son Narayana. So at the time of death, he was calling for his son, but because it was Lord's name, with Yamadutas, Vishnu Dutas also appeared. And because Vishnu Dutas appeared and they all were having conversation that, oh, he is very sinful, we should be taking him. But then Vishnu Dutas were like, no, he has spoken Narayan's word, Narayan's name. So we have come to take him. And with those conversation, who was enlightened? It was Ajamila who was enlightened. His avidya was gone. And that removed the seeds or the desire to do sinful activities and also his tendencies, his habits. So what happened first thing, as per this purport, he regretted his past deeds. And then after regretting, of course, of course, he advanced in Krishna consciousness. But the key point here is that he got association of Vishnu Dutas. That changed his life, that turned his life there. In case of Puranjana, we also see that he was trying to pacify his queen, means he was trying to pacify his intelligence. So, in that context, what we understand that if our intelligence is not purified, we cannot control our mind and senses. And if we can't control our mind and senses, then of course we can't progress. We can't progress spiritually. So that is the key point here, that we must be able to purify our intelligence so we can control our mind and senses. The other example is of Mrigarari hunter, which is who he got the association of Narad Muni. And he was also doing a lot of sinful activities of killing animals. Then again, he was enlightened, so his ignorance was removed. He was then regretful of his past deeds once he got the knowledge through association, and then he advanced in his spiritual life. And there's also an example of proud Brahmanas. So proud Brahmanas from Krishna book, which is when Krishna and Balram went to ask for prasadam, they refused to give him. And that they refused to give him, and they couldn't serve Krishna. Why? Because they were associating with Kamsa, with the fear of Kamsa, and of course with their own pride that they wanted to do the yajna for their own higher position in the spiritual, not spiritual world, but in higher heavenly planets. And because of that, they were so much in ignorance that when Krishna came himself, they couldn't serve him. But his wife, the Brahmana's wives, could serve. So they felt they were so unfortunate with the bad association of Kamsa that they could not, and they were regretful. Later on, they were regretting about it. They could understand that they have done something wrong, but they didn't do anything about it. So the point from all these examples are what we see that some people like Ajamala and Mrigarari Hunter, they were regretting, but at the same time they did something about it. And of course they got association of their spiritual master and they followed the instructions. Because of that they advanced. But in the case of proud Brahmanas, they did not have mercy of anybody guiding them, and they had wrong association of Kamsa. So just by regretting, they went nowhere. They could not progress further. So only regret is not enough. It is more like elephant bathing. So just like how elephants bath and then he goes and roll over the sand again. What is the point of such bathing? So there is one very sweet pastime of Prabhupada where he was giving a Bhagavatam class and a devotee who was serving him forgot his glasses. And he was sitting and looking for his glasses and looked at the devotee and asked him, "Where are my glasses?" And he said, "Sorry, Prabhupada, I forgot your glasses." And they looked at each other for a few moments. And he's like, "Okay, then what you are doing about it? Just sorry is not enough." So then the devotee realized that, oh, I need to go and get the glasses. So that's what we mean here, that just repentance is just going to take you into more of ignorance. But we need to rise above from that. Repentance is a good sign, but at the same time, we need to do something about it positively. So that is the one part of regretting from here. But then the second part is touching the lotus feet of spiritual master, which we talked about. So touching the lotus feet, is that a mechanical process? We touch the lotus feet and we advance? Yeah, it's like what Prabhupada is explaining here, that it is the beginning is because we want to take shelter of the devotee. We want to take the shelter of the spiritual master. So it's a starting of the surrender process. And how do we take shelter is, of course, by giving up our false prestige, our ahankara and pride. That's how somebody can take shelter of the devotees. So there is a quote from Prabhupada's mentioned that in the purport as well, about the Prahlad Maharaj, which we have just read. Said, unless we smear our body with the dust of the lotus feet of devotees, we cannot be successful. Prabhupada gives us hint that it means that the dust of lotus feet of Vaishnava is to surrender unto him. And of course, he explains that it is the beginning of the surrendering process. And then we see many examples. I'll point out a few examples from the scriptures where we understand the importance of the dust of the lotus feet or the surrendering process. So there is a verse in Srimad Bhagavatam 2.3.23, which says, the person who has not at any time received the dust of the lotus feet, dust of the Lord's pure devotee, upon his head is certainly a dead body. So that is how important it is to surrender to the Lord's devotee. And pure devotional service is only attained by one who is sincerely trying to approach Lord's devotee. There is another verse in Bhagavatam, which is from Canto 5, 5.12.12. In that, there is a conversation between King Rahugana and Jadabharat. So when they had a conversation, Jadabharat replied to King Rahugana about how one can advance to Paramahansa stage of life. And he says, O king, the perfectional stage of life cannot be attained unless one is blessed by the dust of the lotus feet of great devotees. So we can see repetition throughout the Bhagavatam, the importance of surrendering to uh, the advanced devotees or the spiritual master. So it cannot be attained. One cannot attain that just by doing lots of austerity. We are going to do Vedic worshipping. I'm just going to follow Dharma and I will perfect my life. Or I'm just going to chant lots of Vedic hymns and I will perfect. But what Prabhupada is explaining that one cannot do all of that without the association of pure devotees, because he has mentioned in the purport as well, in that purport of that verse, that pure devotees, like Krishna is the property of the pure devotees, so one cannot approach him without them. And in Brahma Samhita also it says, Lord cannot be found by great scholars, but he is approachable through his devotees. And we know the importance of Vrindavan. Vrindavan has got everything. Like it has the dust of the lotus feet of Lord and his devotees. That's how potent the Vrindavan dust is. So, but it is unfortunate we can't bring it all the way here through customs. We can. That would be great if we can. So, but it has the potency to receive Radharani's mercy. And who is the topmost devotee of Krishna is Radharani. So we can only get her mercy if we sincerely approach her, sincerely want to serve, become sincere devotees. And we all need recommendation. Without recommendation, we cannot reach Krishna. So if Radharani recommends any devotee, then Krishna, without even seeing it, yes, approved. That person, I am taking it on board. So that's how important it is that we need to serve devotees through Krishna. Then he also, like one may think that to remove the confusion, it is not literally just touching the feet. Literally touching the feet is good, but people may think that, oh, I'm a Mataji, I cannot touch the feet of my spiritual master directly. So is that all the mercy goes to only Prabhus? But that is not the essence here. The point here is that touching the lotus feet is taking shelter of the lotus feet of our spiritual master. Following his instruction is what will give us mercy. So there are some examples of pastime of Prabhupada. Once he was going in Kumbh Mela, and disciples just surrounded him, like, oh, this is India. A lot of people are going to come and touch the feet of Prabhupada. And they were trying to protect Prabhupada that, no, nobody will touch his feet. And Prabhupada was like, what is happening around me? And he asked the devotees, and they said this is what they were trying to do. And he said, no, let them touch the feet. Let them get some mercy. How will they progress? So that is important, but at the same time, it is like some people who can't follow the instruction, that is just starting bit, that they get a tiny bit of mercy through which they can start. There was once a disciple asked a Maharaj was giving a class, and he asked Maharaj that, Maharaj, after the class, please give me your mercy. And he said, where were you when I was giving the class? The mercy was in the class, in the instructions. And then there was also one more pastime where we can understand this context much better, that a devotee ran into a sannyasi and said, Maharaj, please let me touch your feet. Please let me touch your feet. I want to get your mercy. And he said, it is not that easy to get my mercy. You have to follow my instructions to get my mercy. So that is the essence, that when we sincerely follow the instruction of our spiritual master or great devotees, then we will definitely get the mercy. And then there are some portions here where we see, we sing this prayer every day, like Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakti Sadma Vando Muri Savadhana And the translation is, the lotus feet of our spiritual master are the only way by which we can attain pure devotional service. That's how important it is to surrender onto the lotus feet of spiritual master. And the rati, the attachment to it, where we sing Sri Guru Charana Rati Aise Utamagati. So attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desire. That is all spiritual desires that will take us to our ultimate goal. That is the main key, that we must detach ourselves from this material contaminated desires and attach ourselves to serve Krishna. So, as we discussed, that surrender means to subdue our false ego. We must be able to bow down, and that's why touching the lotus feet means physically we are bowing down. We are thinking somebody superior to us, and that is quite important in our spiritual progress. Otherwise, without humility, one cannot approach a spiritual master. As we have seen in Tadvidi Pranipatena, that 3 points are mentioned: pariprashnena, paripatena, pariprashnena, and sevaya. So by approaching a spiritual master, of course, we must approach a spiritual master, and how? Thank you, Mother. And how? By submissive inquiries and by rendering the service. So there is also a very nice pastime of Prabhupada here, that one time devotee asked that, Prabhupada, what is the most important verse in Bhagavad Gita? And he asked the question back to him, what do you think? And the devotee said, I think it is Tadvidi Paripatina. And Prabhupada mentioned, you have understood the secret of Bhagavad Gita. So that's how important this verse is. And then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur also talks about the spiritual master's instruction. He says that Vyavasaya Atmika Buddhir, which we learn from Bhagavad Gita, that we must have a Vyavasaya Atmika Buddhir. So what does that mean? One pointed focus, what does that mean? So it means to take the words of spiritual master as one's life and soul. That's what it means. He says that whatever I am ordered by the spiritual master, that is my life and soul. I don't care for liberation. My only business is to serve my spiritual master. And we see that from Prabhupada's example. His only business was to serve his spiritual master. The instruction of his spiritual master is to preach all over the world. He made that as his life and soul. And we see that in a very in a famous prayer which we sing every day. Yasya prasada bhagavat prasado yasya prasada nagati kutopi dhyayanstu mamstasya yashastri sandhyam vande guru shri charanandavindam. This is such a powerful prayer that the translation, if we notice that, it says, by the satisfaction of the spiritual master, the Supreme Personality of Godhead becomes satisfied. And by not satisfying the spiritual master, there's no chance of being promoted to the plane of Krishna consciousness. I should therefore meditate and pray for his mercy 3 times a day and offer my respectful obeisances unto him, my spiritual master. So what we understand from this, that if we have the mercy of spiritual master, then we definitely get the mercy of Krishna. But if we don't have the mercy of spiritual master, then there's no chance that we can get the mercy of Krishna. So that's how it is linked. So we must be able to please our spiritual master. There is a very nice story in this context. There was a Brahmana in Sri Rangam, you all may have heard that story, that he was given instruction from his spiritual master that read Bhagavad Gita. But he didn't know how to read so well. He could not do it very well. But he was trying his best to follow the instructions. So he was reading, and a lot of other more than qualified, it's like more learned brahmanas were laughing at him. They were saying, "Oh, look at him! He doesn't even know how to read properly, and he's trying to read." And he didn't pay attention to those bits. He continued to follow the instruction. And he was reading Bhagavad Gita. He was looking at the picture of Krishna sitting on a chariot and instructing Arjuna. And he was crying. Tears were rolling down his eyes. And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to him and asked, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm trying to follow the instruction of my spiritual master, trying to read, but of course, I don't know how to read so well. I don't know how much I even understand." But then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked him, "But then why are you crying?" And he said, "I am crying looking at the mercy of Krishna, that being a supreme personality of Godhead, he is sitting as a chariot driver. And looking at that picture, tears rose over. I'm filled with emotions, and tears roll down my eyes." And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said that you have got the mercy of your spiritual master. And of course, because he was trying to follow the instruction of his spiritual master, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Krishna himself came to him. So he got the mercy of Krishna. So that is the link, that we must be able to surrender to Krishna, spiritual master, to get the mercy of Krishna. And Prabhupada mentioned that only surrendering to a bona fide spiritual master will help one. So he's saying very strongly, only. He's using the word only. So which is quite key to understand how important it is to follow the instructions. And I'll end with one very beautiful pastime, just to explain the surrendering process. It's a pastime of when Akura was sent to get Krishna to bring him. Kamsa sent Akura to get Krishna to bring him to Mathura. But what we understand that Kamsa, he was quite learned, but he didn't have proper intelligence to surrender to Krishna and his devotees. So he could not approach Krishna. So he could not go and ask any demons to go and bring Krishna. He could only ask a devotee. So it was Akura who could get, because he was a devotee. So externally, it seems like he was following the instruction of Kamsa to get Krishna killed in Mathura. But internally, he was a devotee, and he was so relishing it that I will meet Krishna. I will get to serve him. I will get to surrender onto him. So when Akura was taking away, on the way, Krishna met a washerman. He saw lots of nice clothes, and Krishna was asking for some clothes to the washerman. And washerman said, "No, you can't get these clothes. These are king's clothes. You little cowherd boys who comes from forest, and you are so dirty in the dust. You think I'm going to give these to you? You should be killed for this offense." And then Krishna used his little finger and cut his, separated his body, head from the body. But he was liberated, because, of course, it was Krishna who liberated him. That's what we understand from this pastime. But what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu explained for this pastime, that this person, this washerman, had spent millions, like thousands of births before, just to see Krishna, to be able to serve him. And then Krishna finally fulfills his desire in this birth. And when Krishna came personally, because of his bad association with Kamsa, he could not serve Krishna. But Krishna was still merciful and gave him liberation. So at least he got the liberation. But then he couldn't relish the higher pleasure of serving Krishna. So because he could not surrender, he could not surrender to the lotus feet of the dust of the lotus feet of the devotee. And then we also see after that, there is a pastime that after that Krishna goes to Sudama, not Brahman Sudama, which is very famous pastime. This is about the garland maker. So he goes to a garland maker's house whose name was also Sudama. And he was very happy to see Krishna. Oh, Krishna, you have come. Let me offer you all the garlands. That's all he had. He was very poor. All he had that he could make some beautiful garlands out of nice flowers and offer it to Krishna. And then he offered it to Krishna and he offered it to Valram, offered it to all his friends. And the idea was what we understand from this pastime that Krishna is not the only focus, that when we want to serve, it is Krishna and his devotees. So we can't ignore his devotees and only serve Krishna. So that's what we understand from his mood, which was quite high. And then Krishna was very pleased. He said, please ask me what you would like to have. And then he asked for three things. He asked for, grant me unconditional love to be able to serve you. Grant me deep friendship with your devotees. That means he's asking for association of his devotees. And grant me genuine compassion for all living entities. So he didn't ask anything for himself. He was at such a higher level just by performing devotional service to Krishna. And then Krishna was so pleased that he is at such an advanced level that he said, I will still give you, even if you don't ask me, I will still give you a life that whatever you desire will be fulfilled. You will have a long life, you will have perfect health, wealth, prosperity, everything flourish materially as well as spiritually. And at the end of your life, you will come to me. So that's what we understand, that we don't need to ask Krishna anything. All we need to is to develop that mood where we want to just serve Krishna with love. We want to have deep connection, association with his devotees. And then we should be able to have compassion so that we can preach and bring other living entities to the platform of devotional service. And just by doing these three activities, we can please Krishna, we can please the spiritual master. And, and then Krishna will provide whatever we need. And he will give what is good for us and will not give what is not good for us. But he is taking care of us. As he says that when when anybody worship him with exclusive devotion, he said, I carry what they lack and I preserve what they have. So that's what we get by performing pure devotion service. Thank you, everyone. If anybody have any questions or comments, please let me know. So we can end if there is no questions or comments for discussion. All right. So